The DC Rape Crisis Center is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year as the oldest rape crisis center in the country and the only rape crisis center in Washington, D.C. Welcome to Impact Moment, brought to you by DCTV. I'm Rebecca Burnett, and today I'm joined by Executive Director Dr. Indira Hennard. Welcome, Indira.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Well, first off, congratulations. Huge milestone to make it to 50 years. That's so exciting. I know that, of course, you guys were founded to help sexual assault survivors with trauma-informed care. You also have a 24-hour hotline. In short, what have you guys celebrated and accomplished over the last 50 years?
Wow, I feel like that's such a huge question, right? So we were founded in 1972, and we were founded in a time where sexual assault was really being politicized, specifically around women's bodies. And so we first started out with a group of volunteers running a 24/7 hotline. And then as the center began to grow and more funding began to come, we started offering individual and group counseling. We started expanding our school programming. Right now, we're offering still our free trauma-informed individual and group counseling, our 24/7 crisis hotline. We also have a 24/7 hospital-based and community-based advocacy program. And our work extends internationally. We were privileged enough to help open the first rape crisis center in Lagos, Nigeria in 2016. We were on the front lines in 2018 when Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was giving her testimony against Brett Kavanaugh. We went on the Hill to support survivors of sexual violence who were being impacted. We spoke at the National Press Club on what it means to usher in a survivor-centered process for Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Even this past year during the insurrection, we were able to establish a specialized crisis hotline for members of Congress and congressional staff who identified as survivors of sexual assault who were being impacted by the insurrection. So we have accomplished so much, and our work is not done, right? We have bared witness and held space for the unimaginable. What we know to be true is that sexual violence is not a single issue because we don't live single issue lives. And so we create multiple choice gates for survivors that help to facilitate healing.
Quite the laundry list. I'm so glad you guys exist. Such great work. And one thing about that work that I wanted to focus on was the work that your organization did over the COVID-19 pandemic, because your response increased 50%. Why was that exactly? Were you ever able to determine why that was, and how exactly were you able to even meet that need?
Yeah, so part of the reason it increases because what we know to be true is that home was not safe during COVID-19. We saw a lot of disclosures. We saw an increase in sexual assault. And so that's why our numbers increased. And so, as I like to say, sexual assault did not stop in the midst of the pandemic. And so what we had to do is really expand our infrastructure for our crisis hotline and add more lines in order to meet the increase in requests for our 24-hour hotline. Additionally, we brought on more staff to help with the emergency crisis sessions, as well as the individual and group therapy. When we pivoted in order to offer our services virtually, we also had to bridge the digital divide. And so we had to make sure our clients had their iPads and other types of technology. What we also know to be true is because a lot of our clients come from low economic backgrounds, Wi-Fi is a luxury. So we had to make sure our clients had access to Wi-Fi. We had to make sure if some folks had lights, right? So it really was a all-out approach in terms of really making sure that survivors had what they need so that their mental health services and other acute services were not interrupted. And I think what we also learned during this pandemic is that survivors were not just coming to us to deal with their sexual trauma, they were coming to us with intersectional issues. So there were issues around food insecurity, issues around emergency housing, right? And so we really had to apply a holistic approach in terms of how we serve the client.
Of course, the pandemic is still going on, and your numbers are still really, really impressive. So far this year, you've served 350 clients, 120 group clients, and 350 clients in the community, like in hospitals, and you've answered over 4,000 crisis hotline calls. By reaching that many people, how are you sort of reaching the DC Rape Crisis Center's goal of making DC free of sexual violence?
So what we know is that this is a marathon, right? Not a sprint. And so our goal is to definitely serve survivors on the acute level, but also understanding that they have long-term needs. It really starts with education. It really starts with reframing the narrative. It starts with really naming and being able to put language around exactly what is sexual violence. I think what we have learned the last few years, particularly at the height of the Me Too movement, is that folks define sexual violence in a very different manner. And so our work goes really deep in terms of really providing community education and training and technical assistance on not just how to identify sexual violence, but also how to name it, how to respond to it, how to heal from it, right? What can folks do in order to really disrupt that rape culture, right? So we still have a lot of work to do. And I think now that the conversation is more prevalent, particularly on a national level, which is also impacting on a local level, we are continuing on that path in order to really bring voice and break the silence around it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. The work you're doing is amazing and fantastic and absolutely needed. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our viewers at home for tuning into this episode of Impact Moment. It's part of DCTV's Nonprofit Capacity Building Grants Program, our original programming to highlight the ways our area's nonprofits are making a difference. Stay up to date with our latest productions and tune into our live stream at dctv.org.